Good afternoon, Robert Scribbler. It is July 10th, 2018. Thank you for joining me for another climate change and clean energy video blog. Now, for this segment, we're going to talk a bit about surging renewable energy, particularly solar in Australia, and the economic forces that are driving that. But before we do, I want to talk with you about the importance of policy. And the word policy is kind of vague, so what I'm going to do is drill down. What policy means in the context of climate change is that government, and this is from state to national to local levels, decides on a course of action, decides to lead on a given issue. And when it comes to the issue of climate change and clean energy, it generally involves providing incentives for individuals and businesses to emit less carbon, to become more efficient, and to purchase or gain access to clean energy-based systems like wind, solar, and electrical vehicles. So when someone talks about climate policy, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about increasing efficiency, cutting emissions, and changing to clean energy. Now, I'd like to call your attention, so before I go into an analysis of what's going on in Australia, I'd like to call your attention to a recent article written by Joe Romm over at Think Progress. And the article is entitled, "Heatwaves Bother You? Under Trump Climate Policies, at another 12 degrees Fahrenheit." So this article is important because it underlines a clear pathway. If we choose to continue to burn fossil fuels and not to incentivize clean energy, then the amount of carbon being emitted into the Earth's atmosphere will be high, and it will tend to follow what is known as a business as usual carbon emissions pathway. And this pathway, for lack of a better word, is bad. I mean, real bad. And Joe Romm highlights that here by pointing out that studies show that under business as usual carbon emissions pathways, in just 2 decades, the 110, 120 degree heat waves that we are seeing today will quickly turn into the 131 degree Fahrenheit heat waves of tomorrow over just a few decades. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph here and invite you to go to Think Progress and read this article. It's a very good one. Joe Romm says that extreme heat has smashed temperature records across the country and around the world in the past week alone. But if we fail to significantly curb emissions of carbon pollution, the path set forth by President Trump's climate policies, then these severe and deadly heat waves will become the normal summer weather over the next few decades. So think about it. If you were surprised at the intensity of this summer's heat wave, then you should be aware that there is worse to come, and that there is much worse to come if President Trump is successful in stymieing the present growth in clean energy development and the present increases in emission reductions. And that's exactly what he's trying to do. So, something to think about. Now, a microcosm of this conflict, perhaps, could be seen in Australia today. And in Australia, you have members of parliament dominating who are trying to defend the burning of fossil fuel, primarily coal, on into the future indefinitely. And such a defense will result in terrible, severe warming of the Earth. In the long term, if all the fossil fuels are burned, and that's the end result of these policies that defend fossil fuel burning, you'll end up with 12 to 15 degrees Celsius global warming ultimately. So, and that corresponds to approximately 1,500 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's what you get if you keep defending fossil fuel burning, as these people in government are now doing. Now, this defense has moved to a point in Australia now where these members of the Australian government are trying to subsidize coal to prop it up, because what's happening now is solar energy and wind energy are becoming less and less expensive, are becoming far more economical than fossil fuels, even on a base monetary basis alone, not even when you include the severe damages that are caused when you heat up the Earth system or you pollute the atmosphere with these mass particulates. What these members of Parliament want to do is force the taxpayer to pay money to basically ultimately ensure their own future suffering and potential demise by just basically spending money to prop up ailing coal. Now, what's happening in Australia right now is pretty amazing. Falling solar panel prices and decent government policies supporting renewable energy, policies laid down by previous governments that the pro-fossil fuel forces are now trying to erode or remove, are resulting in a massive uptake in solar energy. I'm just going to look at some of these solar spot prices right now. So the cells now are down to as low as between 84 for like a really high quality cell, 84 cents to 12 cents per watt. And module prices are all the way down to 54 to 24 cents per watt. And this is amazing. It just keeps falling, and this is due to solar's positive learning curve. Now, these low prices combined with legacy good policy is resulting in a massive surge in solar energy in Australia this year. It looks like we might get as much as, well, nearly 4 gigawatts of new solar capacity in 2018. It's about 3 times as much as any previous year. And this surge will result in total solar installations in Australia moving up from 7 gigawatts to around 11 gigawatts, and that total will represent about 5% of Australia's electricity production. Now, that might not sound like much, but if you're adding 1.5% of new solar capacity per year relative to total electricity production in Australia, it means that coal plants are getting shut down. And from the future of Australia's civilization as well as global civilization, that's a good thing. That means less harm. That means less deadly heat waves. That means a climate system that we can live with. So when you think about policy, when you think about fossil fuels, and when you think about how certain political parties like Trump and the Republicans fight to extend the burning of fossil fuel indefinitely into the future, we should probably also think about the terrible consequences that entails. And when we think about renewable energy's positive learning curve and how renewable energy is becoming an economic force, we should also consider this to be an economic force for the good of humankind and for the stability and survivability of our future.